Welcome, everybody. As you all know, this has been a interesting year as far as DEI, and it's been a challenge, I think, for all of us. Challenge we've been stepping up to, but we decided for this session we'd take a little bit different approach and focus on the relationship between student athletes and administrators. And so we've got Lucas moderating. Happy you're here, and hope you enjoy it.
All right. Well, hello, everyone. I'm Lucas Morgan. I'm the Director of Athletics at LSU Shreveport, and I have the honor of moderating today's session and welcoming you all to possibly the most important session of the convention, relationship building between our student athletes and administrators. And the reason that I've said this is one of the most important sessions today is because we are speaking with 3 expert athletic directors about how to build those relationships with our most important customers, our student athletes. And because we want to make sure you guys have the full perspective, we've invited them to help give their perspective and help us understand how to develop those relationships between us and them. So joining us today, we have Tanya Walker, who is the Vice President for Intercollegiate Athletics at Bluefield College. Tanya, would you please introduce your student athlete you have with us as well?
Absolutely. Glad to be with you this afternoon. I have joining me a student athlete from our basketball team, Omega Stitt.
All right. Appreciate you guys. And then Drew Watson, who's our Director of Athletics at Southeastern University. Drew, would you introduce your student athlete?
Yes, I'm the pleasure to have Devin Ford with us. Devin is a graduate student with our men's basketball team.
All right. Thanks, guys. And then Mike Moore, the Director of Athletics at Soka University. I know Mike was having some issues. Mike, were you able to join us?
I think he's still working through that. So whenever him and his student athlete get logged in, we'll just loop him right into the conversation and we'll keep it rolling.
All right. That sounds good. We'll go ahead and get started. So I think the easiest way to do it today is I'll start with one of the questions for one of our experts, and then the other 2 can share theirs. And then we'll also work through our student athletes as well, because I know that you guys all want to hear from our student athletes, probably more than you want to hear from us. At the end, we'll save about 10 to 15 minutes for questions from the audience. So feel free to put your questions in the chat, and then I'm sure I'll work with Dan probably to get those questions answered at that point. So let's go ahead and start the first question with our administrators, and let's start with a why. So Tanya, why are relationships between student athletes and administrators so important on college campuses?
Thank you, Dan. I think, first and foremost, it builds trust between the administration as well as the student. It's very, very crucial that we build these relationships to enhance the experience for our student athletes, make sure that their voices are heard, and to ensure that they are a part of the change that we seek to create on our campuses.
Yeah, I think it's important because a lot of times people, like I would say me, I assume I've got some answers. I assume from my perspective, there's things that we can do to help to move the ball along. But that's really not the case unless you're listening to student athletes. And I think that's a perspective that we take as athletic directors for any other issue. I don't think we sit and pretend that we're know-it-alls. I think the other side of this is that sometimes because we may be intimidated by the topic of conversation, we kind of shy away from it. And if you shy away from it, it leaves a black hole, and things kind of happen without any direction or your leadership. And so I think the building of relationships is the only way to address these problems.
No, I completely agree. And I think that's a great segue to lump our student athletes into it. So in the same order, Omega, would you talk about it from a student athlete's perspective, why those relationships are important?
From a student athlete perspective, I think it's important to be able to see the face of your athletic director. It just brings a sense of security and trust. And that's something that we need to be able to be comfortable enough to even build a relationship with your athletic director.
Obviously very important. Devin, what do you got?
Just like Omega and Drew said, and Ms. Tanya, just like it's important just to have that foundation built there with them, because at the end of the day, like they run all your program stuff. All you need the ability to go up to them with different conversations you can have with them. I know with me and Drew at least, have some pretty honest conversations outside of basketball or stuff like that. Kind of just meeting the more human side of the ADs at your school rather than just knowing them as your AD administrator. Like get to know them on a different level. I think it's important just to build that relationship and the trust.
Absolutely. So Drew, let's go back to you. What are some of the things that you're doing to connect with your student athletes?
Well, I think going into the summer, to be honest, I was kind of lost. How do we work together to see what the problems are, first of all, at Southeastern, what we need to address. And probably more importantly than that is to figure out what our student athletes need, and what can we do to help where you're at right now. And so I think for me, I decided pretty early on that me and my staff were going to listen, and just hear what the problems are, what the perceptions are, and try and do so not being defensive. I think sometimes when you hear things from student athletes like, whoa, like, no, that's not the way it is. Well, it is the way it is if that's the perception. And so what we did was we first got a group of coaches together, represented our department, our strength and conditioning coach as well. And we decided that we were going to put together a group of student athletes that would be specifically charged with discussions on DEI. And, some of those discussions were intense. I mean, Devin will tell you, but they were very, very helpful in hearing what the frustrations were and trying to get to some solutions.
I think a lot of us sometimes are reluctant to start those conversations. How did you guys begin those conversations?
I think at the time in which those conversations started, it was the national discussion. It was in the wake of the George Floyd murder. And I think, we were hearing, and Devin will tell you, I mean, Devin's been very active on this front. He started conversations within the men's basketball team last summer. I joined a team conference call for men's basketball to start the conversation. And so that was kind of how it started. And I think once we started listening, the objectives became a little bit more clear because we got to know what each other was focused on in the conversation.
Great. Tanya?
I agree with Drew wholeheartedly in the value of conversation. It's often hard to have those difficult conversations, but it's on the other side of the conversation is where we really grow and begin to get a perspective of one another's opinions and thoughts. And so for us, many of you have probably read about or heard about or seen on TV what happened with our men's basketball team in the midst of their decision to kneel during a basketball game and follow that up, ended a game. But that was a great opportunity for us to begin a conversation on, first of all, why did they kneel? And the vast percentage of our community, both locally and the community at large, had no clue as to why they knelt. But they knelt just because of the hypocrisy of the American people. It really stemmed from the riots of the Capitol. And many are arguing or have some type of feeling as to, if Kaepernick were to kneel during the flag or during the national anthem, then there's a lot to be said. However, there wasn't as much said during the riot. So just that hypocrisy. And so having the conversation with our student athletes, first of all, to talk about why they decided to kneel and what was brought about as a result of the change of the actual attention that it brought to the kneeling. From there, it really just allowed us to have a comfortable understanding or a comfortable conversation around change, around social justice, and around what we need to do to create the change that we needed to see. And so meeting with every single team, it was brought about that they would have preferred or they preferred to speak in small groups as opposed to amongst the masses as a full student athlete department or a full student athlete population. But to have those conversations in smaller groups allowed an opportunity for them to be more intimate, more open, more honest, and to really talk about the changes that needed to take place on our campus and what we wanted to do or what the student athletes wanted to do to be part of the change that they sought.
So you mentioned it a little bit. Did that open up additional conversations outside of the athletic department that benefited the college as a whole?
Absolutely. And so It opened conversations with faculty, with staff, with faculty, as well as having them with student athletes and the general student population. It really highlighted some of the issues that we were having on our campus and in the community at large. But at the end of the day, it's about the work that they wanted to do to create the change. They could have knelt all day long. And yes, that brought attention to everything that was going on. But without the work, none of the change would be realized. And so our student athletes had an opportunity to not only voice the changes that they saw, but to talk about the role that they played or will play in creating the changes on our campus that need to take place.
Oh, that's great. Jumping to Omega, would you talk a little bit about what your experience was on campus with all of that?
My main experience was how, like, the situation she just talked about, how it was just a major catalyst for our community and our school as a whole to be able to have those conversations. As a member of the Student Government Association here in school and Student Athletic Advisory Committee, I was able to be in multiple meetings with the different teams and just to hear the different conversations and to see A.B. Walker putting her feet to work and just doing the hard work necessary to have these conversations. You can see the change amongst the community and start to ask questions and just to try more about what's really going on and why we know. So it was a major catalyst and it definitely changed our college for the better.
Oh, that's great. And I know we're having a little bit of audio issues with you, but I think everybody should have been able to get the majority of what you were saying there. Devin, going down to you as student athletes, what kind of questions are you asking your administrators? And what do you believe is work to open up those lines of communication?
I think for me, and I know for my team, the questions that we asked really was Drew was if we take these certain steps, like kneeling for the anthem and stuff, we had a conversation about that, probably a couple of them. Are you going to support us and have our backs on the issue that's going to come? Because obviously we're not in Kentucky, but even where we live at in Lakeland, the school is predominantly, I would say, more Caucasian than it is minority. And so we know people come to our games often from the town we live in, and they probably won't agree with what we're doing. And our big thing was, how are you going to combat that when people come and ask you questions of why you let your teams, kind of free them of their expressions they have? And so the thing with that, though, was Drew challenged us as a team, and me as one of the captains, know your why. As Ms. Tanya was saying, know your why. Don't just do it because you see everybody else doing it, because you see the NBA players doing it. Do it because you have a real reason why, you have a strong feeling of why you're doing it. And then don't just stop there with just kneeing, actually take some action and do some things to help that either on campus or in the community. I know for my team, we're really active in our community in Lakeland. That was our big thing for this year, which is being active. And I think with Drew's help, just opening a line of communication with him, he put us in contact with the right people to help us do what we needed to do, kind of get the low-hanging fruit out the way. So I think just that communication with Drew and things we've done together, I think it's very important for us as a teams. Any team that needs to talk to him, go to him and just be willing to receive the feedback that he has to give you.
No, that's great. Drew, do you want to elaborate any further on some of the things that Devin talked about there?
Yeah, Devin is, I think a lot of people like to complain about issues but not do anything about them, and that crosses all races, but I think for students in particular, I don't think they always know what to do, how to affect change. But Devin of his own accord got a number of law enforcement officers and had them here for lunch in the cafeteria, just so he and his team could ask them questions. He also put together a voter registration drive on campus. And then they came up with a really creative thing that they did called Can You See Me before men's basketball games. And I'll let him explain that. But it was really creative and very effective. Why don't you tell them, Devin?
Yeah, so the "Can you see me" statement we did before our game, we did a thing where one of our professors on campus is known for the speech he gave called "Can you see me?" So at the beginning of the game, we'll all line up in a line and it's like, "Can you see me?" And then you say like who you are, what you are. So it's more than, so no one answer was, "Oh, I'm an athlete. Oh, I'm a basketball player." That was no one's answer. It was, I'm a college graduate. I'm a son. I'm a believer." Just stuff like that, really about yourself, more than just who you are on the court or off the, like, you know what I'm saying? So it's more like that. So I think that just gave us a chance to kind of express ourselves to people at our games in a different way. That's probably less offensive to some people. It's more like kind of open the relationship to people in the community. I think that's something that we did. I think that was really, like, you know, really important for us. And thank you for Drew for letting us have that time to do that.
No, that's great. It sounds like you guys are doing quite a bit of things, and that kind of leads me into my next question. And Drew, you started it, and Tanya, I'll jump to you. What are some of the programming that you guys are doing on campus? What are some of the specific things that you've done that you feel like have been successful in building that relationship with students as well as with the community through there?
Yes, I think the one of the biggest things is really identifying a person that has been titled the coordinator for belonging, and just really identifying a person that our students are able to open up to ask those tough questions, to help them manage through those tough issues that they're having, whether it is within a team or on the campus, as it pertains to those social injustices or angst that they are having. And so I think that has opened the door for us tremendously to be able to just have the conversation. And so we're doing a lot more talking through town hall meetings and conversations with our SAC. Our SAC has gotten together to develop a pledge that will be read before every home competition that speaks to the institution's position on social justice. Working with our SGA as well as our SAC to make sure that our students are heard and have a voice and a platform for them to really be as expressive as possible and to be a part of the change, as I said earlier, that they seek. And just really, being willing, I think, is the first thing, and having the difficult conversation, helping them to understand their why and helping them to be able to articulate and to create the change, both on campus, within teams, within the entire campus, and within the community. So those are just some of the things that we're doing after the kneeling incident took place that has really allowed for us to be seen, our student athletes to be heard, and to create the changes on our campus.
You mentioned a little bit ago that at first they preferred to meet in smaller groups. As they started seeing more of their teammates and their fellow students having those conversations, did that open up the door for larger conversations among the athletic department? And did it make people feel more comfortable to be able to talk about it?
Absolutely, because it stemmed from relationships. And so having those conversations where we could really chip away at the ice, and with those that they felt comfortable with those that they felt they could be vulnerable with, their coaches. I think it will continue to lead to larger conversations, but they expressed that they appreciated the opportunity to just have those small conversations or conversations with smaller groups at onset, because it is a difficult conversation. And so what we're calling them on our campus are courageous conversations. When we talk about race and gender issues and social justice or injustice, those can be very challenging conversations because it's really based around someone's upbringing, someone's past and history. And so it allows for us an opportunity to not just voice our opinions, but to also hear the perspectives of others. So those small group settings have been advantageous for us in our conversations.
Very good. Drew, are you doing anything else to utilize the student athlete voice on campus?
Yeah, I mean, we've, as part of this group, we've gotten together, we had a board member come in and speak to the group. We've got a vice president on the group. But I think the main thing was taking their complaints, their main complaints on this committee, and really starting a dialogue that is leading to change. I don't think, obviously change never happens as quickly as any of us want it to, and I think Devin will probably affirm that even on campus. But the focus on relationship is really important because there's been a trust that's been developed here. I mean, Devin kind of alluded to it, but he and I went out to lunch off campus and just, we disagreed on a lot. I mean, but we just put it all on the table and, decide that we'd respect our differences and we'll work together for change. And, and the other thing is we, as a Christian school, we came up with a verse. Basically, if someone says they love their brother, they love God, but don't love their brother, they're a liar, because it does not working out in real life. So I think that's been using scripture to guide our approach has been really helpful.
Devin, do you want to talk at all about the conversation and the lunch you had with Drew and maybe how that opened up some opportunities?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, me and Drew decided, let's sit down and talk about it, because I know over the summer in our meetings, I was kind of ignorant to the fact that I was so emotional, acting on emotion of what's going on, and just like being SCU for then going on my 6th year now, like just kind of seeing things but kind of letting things slide for the longest. So we went out to lunch and kind of opened my gates, opened my arms to him, and kind of like, let me see where he's coming from. He always alludes to, I'm a 30-something-year-old white male. Like, what I'm saying? I don't know what it's like to be you. And I'm the same, I don't know what it's like to be him, and see where things are coming from. So I think just having that time to sit down and really kind of hear him and hear where he's coming from, and kind of changes my perspective on how I need to approach situations, because not everybody's going to agree with what I got to say or agree with my background, because no one knows unless you talk to them. So I think just having that conversation with him, an honest conversation, just kind of telling him more about my story, him like telling about his story, I think really opened up our line of communication to really get things done that we want done. So stemming from that conversation, the group became as strong as it is. The things on campus that we're doing and we'll continue doing in our community, I think that really stemmed from that conversation that me and Drew had. Because had that conversation never happened, I don't think half the stuff that we've done would really be as intentional as it has been.
Hold on, Drew told you he was in his 30s.
He might have meant to sound like that. He might have said 40. I don't know. I might have said 40.
Thank you, Devin. I really appreciate that.
I got you, Doc.
Omega, do you want to talk? Oh, go ahead.
Piggyback a little bit off of what Devin said, and I'm going to lean on you a little bit, Omega, because after all of this happened for us, it was important that we began to share our stories, because everyone has a story and everyone has a different perspective. And so we worked with our students to, first of all, identify those students who could be articulate and to really begin to share some of the experiences that they had been through in our community as well as the community at large.
Did we lose Tanya?
I think where she left off. So basically, from the small conversations that we were able to have, from the catalysts that you would like to see. So it was a good event, and I really loved it.
I think we lost maybe about the last 30 seconds of what you said there. At least I did on my end. Would you be able to repeat some of that?
Yeah, I was that at the event, we were able to come and speak what we had been through, and just in front of everybody. Like, a lot of people came out, a lot of student athletes, and you were just able to express whatever you want to express, regardless of how anybody else felt. So I thought that was a really good event for our campus community.
Well, that's great, and it's great that they're giving you guys the voice and the opportunity to be able to have those conversations. Switching gears just a little bit, Drew, are there some things that you tried on campus that maybe didn't work? If so, were there things that you learned from? Were there things that you talked about at your staff that you wanted to try that just never happened? Plans for the future?
No, everything works that we do. We never make mistakes. So no, it was just kidding, obviously. I think early on, as the country was kind of reeling from the George Floyd situation, I think there were a lot of a lot of people wanting to do something on campus, but there was no organization to it. It was just kind of random. And so I think, if anything, I think I probably waited too long to put something in place. Now, once the conversation started, you know, they were very helpful and people were encouraged to speak their mind. Those meetings, even with the coaching staff, were very emotional. And, you know, I had coaches coming to me and saying, hey, I just, you know, I'm sorry I kind of let it fly in that meeting. I just came from a meeting with my players and they were upset. It got me upset. And I walked into the meeting with those emotions. And, you know, but that coach was apologizing to me for bringing his emotions into the meeting. But really, it was while it was frustrating, it was helpful for the group to see and hear those emotions and how impactful they are. And so, you know, for us, I think there's a tendency to stop listening once something's not in your face anymore. And so I think that's a huge challenge for all of us is, you know, we decided we weren't just going to put out a statement. We were going to listen, we're going to build relationships and try and affect change. But I think the temptation is still there that, you know, that, oh, well, this isn't in our face anymore, so we're not going to have those conversations. And that's something we're really on guard against.
Absolutely. We need to continue to have them because you're absolutely right. We all have that tendency sometimes to be able to forget about it if it's not right there in front of us. And it's important for our current student athletes and our student athletes of the future to be able to continue to talk about those things and help make their experiences better. Tanya, I think we lost you in the middle of what you were saying. Do you want to go back?
I do. Thank you so much. I was just saying that it's important to have the opportunity or take the opportunity to hear from our students and what they are, some of the things that they go through on our campuses. And we were able to do that. We selected 10 or so students that wanted to tell their story because many would, you know, if it's not something that's prevalent in our day to day, sometimes it's very dismissive and we have a tendency to be dismissive, but to be able to hear some of the encounters with the police or some of the encounters with those that are on our campuses to include, or some of the things that they go through and to just hear how impactful that could be to the overall experience. And I just, if we had time, if Omega could speak to that, because he was one of the speakers and it was a powerful, powerful, powerful session for everyone on our campus to just hear some of the stories that have been hurtful, impactful, that have really created negative experiences for our student athletes and what we all need to do to make sure that that doesn't happen as our students matriculated through school. So Omega, if you had anything to share on that town hall meeting, if you would, please.
Yeah, so to reiterate, when we dropped out, I told them about the big discussion forum we were able to have as a result of the small conversations that we started and that you started to work on. So the discussion forum, I was able to speak and express certain things that not only that I was feeling, but the community and my teammates were feeling. I was able to speak on their behalf, and it was just real eye-opening to hear the other stories and other people who were going through different things, and especially the encounters that they've had, because I'm not aware of it, so I didn't necessarily experience all the things that they have. So
I think we might have lost him again. He's got some incredible stuff to say, so it's too bad that we're having the audio issues that we're having on his end. I know a lot of questions are coming in right now. I do have a question I want to ask Devin. You have a room full of athletic administrators, all of them sitting here in front of you. What are we not doing as athletic administrators that we should be doing to help improve the student athlete experience?
I don't know, that's tough. I would say, but as ADs though, you don't have to get to have the time, you know, to set up for the intimate relationships. I'm sure you guys want to have all your student athletes because there's so many teams, so many people to get to and so many kids. I would say just my thing would be to just keep trying to make the relationships with people on your different teams that you have. Because that stuff you don't really forget. Like, I'm not gonna ever forget the lunch I had with Drew. Like, I'm gonna forget how many games we won and lost, but that lunch with Drew is something always gonna stick with me that I can use later in life to help someone else out in my situation. I would say just keep trying to make the relationships as you can. I mean, as you can. I know you're busy, schedules are busy, you have a lot to do, a lot of responsibility. But I would say anytime you have a little chance to, you know, grab someone for lunch or to stop someone walking after practice somewhere and just kind of talk to them 5 or 10 minutes, even like that little interaction can really change someone's perspective on how they see you maybe, or just how they're going about their day and how they start thinking more. So I would just say like those little moments you can find to pick out and talk to somebody and kind of listen to their story, or you just share yours. Like, I think that's just very important. That really can enhance someone's just the whole 4 years they have with you, or even if they transfer for a year. That's something they're just never gonna forget.
Love it. Omega, let's try again.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you.
All right, cool. So definitely the second, what Devin said about just having those personal relationships with your student athletes will bring about just a certain impact and impression that you'll never forget. So definitely the relationship building, just being out in the community and just putting a name to face, as I mentioned earlier. I think that was the main thing for an athletic director to do. And I think AD Walker, out of all of my athletic directors, she's definitely done the best job with that.
That's great. We appreciate that. So, Doko, looks like you've added. So I have a question. We're going to go to questions from our administrators that we have here, but the one question that we'd like to have you answer is, you've got a room full of athletic administrators here. What are we not doing that you wish we were doing to make your experience as a student athlete better?
From my experience during my time at SOCA, I think a lot has been done so far. A lot of progress has been made, including establishing like a diversity and inclusion committee. But this happened last year. So these are some of the steps that were taken, which made me feel more like the environment was becoming more inclusive. I think that there still needs to be more. And one of the areas that I'm pushing for is for us to start doing more volunteer work with groups and organizations that are supporting particularly Black and Brown communities. So that's what I'm pushing for now. But I think so far the groundwork is being laid with like having trainings with RISE, which is something we started last year. And that has been working really well. I'm feeling optimistic for the future.
Very good. Dan, do you want to address the questions that we have? I think there's some that have come in.
Sure. Yeah. Let me go through the chat here. Nick Rule said, question for the student athletes. What do you want to see continued with what's going on your campuses and enhanced as we go into next year? So, well, I guess we'll start with Toko and then we'll go to Devin and then Omega.
I think that's a very great question. One of the things that I touched on briefly earlier was starting to work with RISE, which does trainings on like awareness of racial bias and how to create a more inclusive environment, more welcoming. But I found that training was a bit on the baseline level. So it was explaining a lot of like terminology, and it was very discussion based. So what I would like to see is for it to just be taken further. Last year was only our first one. So I'm hoping that we're able to just keep building on it. And one of the things that we've done through our Student Athlete Advisory Committee, or SAC, is we have sessions where we debrief what we learned in the trainings. And I think those sessions where we're having just discussions and with administrators also attend these meetings, we just get to exchange what we feel. We just get to have an environment of exchange, and we get to talk about what we liked, what we didn't like. And one of the major things that a lot of us thought was missing from our RISE sessions was how to take action. So that's something that we're working towards, and we're still having more trainings. So yeah, great question.
Yeah, I would say for us, our community that we have as athletes is made up of mostly of the captains of each team. I would say for us to enhance it, take that group to the next level and kind of get into rooms with the higher ups at our school, not to like ask for anything, but just like talk to them and because we talked to Drew said, one of our board members at SU, which is rare because, they're always doing other things. I would say just, have more people come to the table, because most of the time we go to our meeting, it's probably the same, anywhere from the same 6 people that we usually have. Obviously it's hard in season and stuff to get everybody find a good time, but kind of keep that group going and kind of pick up speed with it, so it stays around after some of us who are older guys graduate. Because I would hate for that group to just kind of fall apart after we graduate and leave and not pick up anywhere until the next murder happens or until something else happens. I think just that group to stay alive and keep going and keep doing things in the community as a group alone, and then kind of banding together as teams, as whole teams, to kind of build a relationship and go out in the community, do stuff together, kind of collaborate with other teams on campus that you're not usually used to talking to. So I'll say that for sure.
Yeah, I agree with the both of them. Just continue the conversation, continue to work in the community, and just continue to build awareness to people who may not know the full story or whatever. So just continue to have those conversations and continue to be aware.
Perfect. Thank you. I'm just trying to scroll through and I'm seeing some themes. One from Tim Curry here wanted to know, basically, as administrators, did you reach out to your student athlete leaders, or did your student athletes kind of come to you as a group? I think there's a couple different questions on here on just how to start the conversation. How did it come? Was it something that you set up as an administrator, or was it organic? I'm kind of paraphrasing, but trying to lead into it there.
Yeah, for us, there was a conversation that was initiated by our president with our men's basketball team after the kneeling episode that didn't really fare well, and they really didn't get anywhere. And so at that point, I said, allow me to speak with each one of my teams. Allow me to speak one-on-one with each of them. And I partnered with one of the deans on our campus, and we spoke individually to each of our 20 teams and just had that conversation just to identify the changes that we needed to see, what was going on our campus, why the team decided to kneel, and to have that conversation with no judgment, but really out of love and the opportunity to just engage in the courageous conversation. And out of that, just really took the steps to identify the changes that we wanted to see and to create the buy-in that was necessary to move the needle on some of the changes that were identified.
Yeah, for us, I'd say it was simultaneous. The student athletes were, wanting to be listened to, and they were expressing themselves, and we decided to listen at the same time. So I don't think it was one or the other. It just kind of all came together at the same time.
Okay. Question for the student athletes. We'll start with Omega this time, then Devin, then Toko. If an administrator could create a safe space on campus for student athletes to feel free to express themselves, what would that look like for you?
Well, in our particular situation with how we did the small groups with your teams, I think that's a good, safe way to do it, because you're with your mates all the time. And so you don't really have to necessarily speak a certain way because, you're more comfortable with your regular teammates. So I think having the small conversations first and then gradually building up will create the safe space necessary. So that's why.
Yeah, I would agree with Omega. I think just having the way to be candid with each other as athletes, as we are in locker rooms and stuff like that, walking around campus. I think, but also having you guys administrators in the safe space, I think is important too. So you kind of hear, where everybody's heart's coming from. That's not filtered. Kind of the real issues, what's going on, and then also Drew did a good job of taking himself out of the picture too in some meetings, and kind of just having us as student athletes run it, kind of control the safe space, kind of way to put it. And just having that be done, just letting people be candid and being genuine and honest with who they are in front of their team and other teammates that they're comfortable with other teams. So I know we're really close with football and women's soccer, so we're really easily open up to them and be candid about things, and we partner with things we've had conversations about. I think that's kind of what our safe space will look like.
I agree with Devin and Omega. I feel that our SAC, our Student Athlete Advisory Committee, does serve as a safe space for us, And I think it comes back to what Devin was saying, where it's predominantly driven by students. Our voices are listened to. That's where we get to speak, and administrators mostly listen to us. So we're able to speak freely. And it's not just, I'm on the track and cross country team, but this group spans like all the different teams. So women's golf is in it, soccer, swimming. So we all have this environment of exchange, and it's really beneficial. So another thing that we do is we identify issues that we really want to address. So it could be diversity and inclusion, it could be community service, it could be how can we make our constitution better. And we were able to create smaller groups within what's already a small group. So these smaller groups are able to really delve deeply into what the issue is and how to resolve it, how to make things better. And then we all return to the bigger group and share. So we will organize an activity that we will share with the group. And this has really helped to have like everyone's voices heard. It's not just when I was vice president, it wasn't just me speaking to the group. Everyone got a chance to speak. And it just comes back to recognizing as well that everyone's voice is valid in the group and giving people, creating the space for everyone to share. So that has really worked for us. And going back to what Devin said, I really hope that it stays that way or it's built upon once I graduate. So we're really just working with and including people who are like in classes below me, so they can take on the leadership and continue creating these safe spaces in the future. Yeah.
Perfect. We're almost at time here. I'm going to throw one more question to the panel and then we'll wrap up. And I'd like everyone to just kind of weigh in. But I mean, we have almost 100 people on here, mostly athletic directors. If there was one takeaway from this conversation that you'd like to send everyone back to their campus with, just what's that one quick takeaway that they could kind of learn and grow from this? Let's start with Devin.
I would say the biggest takeaway for me would be like what you're doing now. Come to the table. We want to listen to your student athletes, but also, you know, we as athletes have to be open to listening to you guys as well. I think just challenging them with that, and then challenge yourself, look in the mirror and be like, am I doing everything that I physically can do to help my campus and help my community grow?
Yeah, I would say, just piggybacking off what Devin said, in our first meeting, we talked about how sometimes when ideas are expressed, even with ADs and presidents, and if the idea or the suggestion isn't taken, well, we weren't listened to. When you could have been listened to, but it just, there was some disagreement. So in our first meeting, we talked about, hey, bring the ideas, and if there's disagreement, it doesn't mean we're not listening, but it causes us to go to the next level, to delve into why can't we do this, or why aren't we doing this? And then you start the conversation, the relationship deepens. So, you know, I would just say, redefine what listening means.
I would agree with what has been said already, but I would also share that it's important to acknowledge the issues that are going on, because saying nothing is saying so much. And so it may be very difficult to have those conversations of race and gender inequities and social injustice, but at least acknowledge what's going on. And to your student athletes who are in the minority, acknowledge their pain. As simple as, you know, are you okay? I may not understand how you feel, but just know that I'm there. I'm praying for you. And I think that means a whole lot more than saying nothing at all.
I would just say, start the conversation. That's the main thing. Just start it, and don't be afraid to dive into deep waters with your student athletes and athletic directors.
Yeah, just to add, at least for the work that we're trying to do on our campus to make it more inclusive and to foster diversity, it's also a huge part of the growth is acknowledging our weaknesses, working on them, as well as also how we react when we mess up. Because a lot of us have instances where we will mess up and we're not going to do everything right. But I think that our administrators, because we've really been able to connect with them, they make mistakes, we make mistakes, but we're able to support each other as well through the mistakes that we make. And I think that kind of really, it humanizes all of us. Like none of us are going to do everything perfectly, but we're just really trying to support each other with growing and getting to the next level. And yeah, I have actually a brief story that I'll share. I have a name that is very difficult to pronounce, and I have had instances where it's just not pronounced how it's supposed to be, but they really try, and in the times when directors have said it wrong, they even like will publicly apologize for it. So it's also owning up to our mistakes, owning up to our weaknesses, and in the safe space, it's okay. We just keep growing, we keep moving, we keep supporting each other, and that works for us. And I think it'll work. It's a model that can work in several environments.
Perfect. Thank you. I don't know if you wanted to wrap it up at all, Lucas, but we're about out of time. I really appreciate our panelists and everyone tuning in. I hope everyone found this beneficial, but hopefully you guys can take some stuff away from this back to your campus and start the conversation.
I agree. They all said it best. We appreciate you all taking the time. We appreciate the panelists, the experts, the student athletes. A lot of eye-opening stuff today, and I hope that everybody on this call can take it back and improve what's happening on their campuses. So thanks, everybody, and have a great rest of the week.
Thank you.